Hello and welcome to the Minimum Competence episode for Tuesday, February 3rd, 2026. I'm your host for today, Andrew Leahy, an assistant teaching professor of law at Drexel Klein School of Law. On today's episode, we have Ørsted's offshore wind case, a DOJ probe into the Alex Pretti shooting, VW's tariff retreat, and California's stalled mileage tax reform. Let's remember, February is the border between winter and spring, and read today's legal news. On this day in legal history, February 3rd, 1870, the 15th Amendment to the United States Constitution was ratified, marking a pivotal moment in American legal history. The amendment prohibits federal and state governments from denying a citizen the right to vote based on, quote, race, color, or previous condition of servitude. Its ratification was the third and final of the Reconstruction Amendments, following the 13th, which abolished slavery, and 14th, guaranteeing equal protection and due process amendments. The 15th Amendment was a direct response to the systemic disenfranchisement of Black Americans in the post-Civil War South. While it granted a legal foundation for Black men's suffrage, implementation faced immediate resistance. Southern states adopted literacy tests, poll taxes, grandfather clauses, and other discriminatory practices to circumvent the amendment and suppress Black political participation. Despite its passage, the amendment's guarantees would not be meaningfully enforced until the passage of the Voting Rights Act of 1965, nearly a century later. The legal battles stemming from the 15th Amendment's promise have shaped much of the country's voting rights jurisprudence and continue to echo in current debates about voter ID laws, redistricting, and access to the ballot box. A U.S. federal judge is set to hear arguments on February 5th regarding Danish company Ørsted's request to lift the Trump administration's pause on its offshore Sunrise Wind project near Long Island, New York. Ørsted has asked for a preliminary injunction, warning that without a decision by February 6th, it could lose access to a specialized vessel crucial for cable installation, putting the project's timeline, financial viability, and even survival at risk. The Interior Department halted 5 offshore wind projects in December, citing newly obtained classified national security concerns, particularly radar interference. Ørsted's filing states the company has already committed over $7 billion to the Sunrise Wind project, which is about 45% complete and projected to power nearly 600,000 homes by October. Judge Royce Lamberth, who previously granted an injunction for Ørsted's Revolution Wind project off Rhode Island, will preside over the case. 4 similar wind developments have already won legal relief, allowing construction to continue during litigation. The ongoing delays reflect broader tensions between offshore wind expansion and the Trump administration's skepticism of the technology, as well as evolving security concerns. The U.S. Department of Justice has launched a civil rights investigation into the fatal shooting of Alex Pretti, a 37-year-old ICU nurse, by federal immigration agents in Minneapolis. Pretti was killed during an enforcement operation that has since drawn national outrage and led the Trump administration to alter its tactics in Minnesota. Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche said the FBI is conducting a preliminary review with potential involvement from the DOJ's Civil Rights Division, though he emphasized that the investigation is still in early stages. Video footage verified by Reuters and others shows Pretti being tackled by agents while holding a phone and an officer retrieving a firearm from his body just before shots were fired. The Justice Department said a formal criminal civil rights probe would only proceed if the evidence supports it. Local officials have voiced distrust of the federal response and are conducting their own inquiry. Pretti is the second protester killed by federal agents in Minneapolis this month, and his family, represented by attorney Steve Schleicher, is demanding a transparent and impartial investigation. So far, no similar federal probe has been opened into the earlier shooting of Renee Good, also by an ICE officer. In this week's column for Bloomberg Tax, I argue that Volkswagen's decision to cancel plans for a new Audi plant in the U.S. highlights the limitations of using tariffs as a cornerstone of industrial policy. The assumption underpinning tariff-heavy strategies is that the U.S. market is irresistible enough to force global firms to onshore production, even as tariffs erode that market's size and appeal. Tariffs have come to function like sin taxes, meant to discourage consumption. But unlike cigarettes or soda, the goal with trade policy is not abstention, but investment and economic engagement. Instead, firms like VW are responding by pulling back as higher costs reduce consumer demand and make U.S. market share too small to justify large-scale investment. The belief that global manufacturers can swiftly build U.S. capacity ignores the time, cost, and uncertainty involved, especially in capital-intensive sectors. VW's exit is rational. It doesn't make financial sense to break ground on a multi-billion-dollar plant when the target market is shrinking and the returns are questionable. Policymakers need to move beyond blunt tools and design trade incentives based on real market data, such as U.S. demand and potential return on investment. That means requiring ROI modeling before tariffs are imposed and asking whether the targeted company even has enough exposure to be moved by them. If the answer is no, we risk losing access to competitive products, jobs, and consumer choice, not gaining them. Trade policies should be surgical, not punitive, and should acknowledge that capital follows incentives, not threats. In a piece I wrote for Forbes late last week, and with apologies for a double dose of me today, I examined California's long-running flirtation with a mileage-based tax to replace its declining gas tax revenues, and how what began as a test program has quietly become a form of policymaking through delay. In 2014, the state authorized a pilot program to study a, quote, road usage charge, basically a per-mile fee designed to keep transportation funding solvent as gas consumption drops. That pilot wrapped in 2017 and showed the system works. Vehicles can be tracked, billing can be simulated, and the technical challenges are manageable. But nearly a decade later, no mileage tax has been implemented, and new legislation, that'd be AB 1421, would extend the advisory committee until 2035. The real issue now isn't feasibility, but political avoidance. The state has drifted into a passive strategy where permanent pilots and advisory boards take the place of real decisions. This kind of inertia has a name. It's called policy drift, when the law remains formally unchanged but materially obsolete. California's ongoing study phase has become a way to defer a difficult conversation about revenue and equity in a post-gasoline economy. The technology exists, and other states have already tested it. What's missing is political will and public engagement. AB 1421 doesn't collect revenue or educate voters. It simply extends the status quo under the guise of preparation. From the outside, it looks like planning. In practice, it's a weather balloon designed to measure political tolerance, not policy readiness. And with that, as always, I thank you so much for listening to Minimum Competence, your daily news podcast for lawyers. If you're looking for more than Minimum Competence, links to further reading on all the topics touched on today are in the show notes. And reviews go a long way towards helping new listeners to find our show. If you have a moment, leave a rating or review in your podcast player. We'd sure appreciate it. And if you know someone that might be interested in a story we cover, consider sending them the episode. But remember, nothing here should be construed as legal advice because it is certainly never that. Minimum Competence is available at minimumcomp.com and wherever you get your finely crafted podcasts. If you haven't checked out the website in a while, give it a look. There are complete transcripts and resources for each episode and its corresponding segments, as well as an opportunity to receive new episodes in email, newsletter, form. We'll see you back here tomorrow, and until then, remember, even winter won't last forever. February bears this secret in its bones.